Hello, Brian McCarthy here from Bold&Break. I'm delighted to bring you a chat with Joe Clay and myself where we talk about kind of an array of subjects, not just motion graphics, not just the industry. You know, we touch on a number of things that have influenced our career, influenced our choices, and of course we do talk about motion graphics as well. Unfortunately, the last 10 minutes of the interview was corrupted. Just be aware of that when it cuts off. It wasn't meant to end like that. Please comment in the chat, ask questions. I'll be in the chat, I'll be present, and I look forward to sharing this chat with all of you. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy it. What's been kind of your route into motion design? How'd you stumble into it? Is it through college? Did you go to university?
Yeah, well, I was in college and I was basically doing like fine arts type stuff. So I was like drawing, painting, but I had done like Photoshop and Illustrator and all that kind of stuff when I was a kid. So I kind of was still kind of interested in like digital media of some sort. And there was a class like series there. You had to pick a specialization in the degree path that I was on. So I picked electronic media because that was just kind of like something I was still interested in. And as I started to take the classes in that, I think like the first class we had, the first, not the first class itself, but like the first class we were in, they like demoed like After Effects at some point, just for like one day. The school wasn't really about like a lot of places, this is fine art, so it's not like they're like, oh, this is how you use this software and this is how this works and this is what you do when you're in a job. So it was like, you could use this to make cool stuff. And we're like, okay, cool. That's pretty neat. The guy was like, this is like Photoshop for video. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Actually, I've always been interested kind of like in video, but I never really thought like how to do animation or any of these kind of things. So I started to like play with it after that. And like every project I like was working in After Effects on things. And I started to learn stuff from the internet and what was available then. And so
you were way more interested in like the video side of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say like video in terms of just like live action type things, I guess. But although I did do a lot of live action style work, but it wasn't just that, I guess. It's just like I started to look around when I was learning different things. Like I think right about then, I think Andrew Kramer, like near the end of my time in college, he was starting to make things. And like there was Creative Cow, like Aaron Rabinowitz and all that kind of stuff. So I was like watching those things and like, so I started to like branch out into all this other aspects of like motion graphics and things. So it kind of like was a natural progression as I started to make things move and then make them move in the ways that I wanted them to move, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I always found when I went, like when you were going into like educational courses like 10, 12, 15 years ago, it was like a course that tries to touch every piece of software and it never specialized. And you were like, I want to just focus on this. Why am I doing an essay on web or like fine art or like, which I kind of struggle with myself which was kind of good as well because you got to touch everything. But yeah, no, I know what you mean.
Ours was a very conceptual like school. So as far as that goes, like it was all about thinking about the things. So it was a good foundation as far as that goes. Like how, like, why are you making this, or like what are you making it for, and how do you achieve that kind of stuff? Like to make people feel something about things. So it was good in that aspect of it, but it wasn't really like instructional. It was more like, well, you could figure it out now. Here's kind of how you do it. So have fun making it.
Yeah. So kind of like after college, like how hard was it for you to get a job, and like how many years were you in full-time work?
I graduated in 2007 from college. And so like I had like one solid year before like the economy like went to hell.
Oh yeah, shit. Everything just went like downhill after that.
Yeah, just like so I applied at a couple places locally, and like one was like more like one like really was like kind of what I wanted to do, but it was like it's in a technically a different city. It's like across the bridge, which is in Tampa. The bridge is like the most trafficked area. Okay. And it's like if from my house you can get to like this other city of St. Pete, you can get there from like in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But sometimes coming back, if there's an accident, it's like 4 hours.
So it's kind of like the New York and New Jersey kind of situation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That kind of thing. So I was like, all right, if it works out, that'd be cool, I guess. They'd like do cool work and whatever. And that's actually ironically where Sev, my like business partner and co-workbench guy, was working roughly about that time. So I think he actually was one of the people that actually saw my first demo reel, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But I applied there, and then they like took so long to get back to me that I had applied somewhere else. This other company over here called Tampa Digital Studios, which is no longer in existence. But they decided to hire me, and I worked there for like a year, I think, or so. I think it was about a year, I think. And then the economy tanked, and then like there was me and another guy were the two motion people there, because it was like this production company, and there wasn't just enough work for like two people, and I was the last person there. So they're like, "All right, well, it's time for you to go." So
Oh, yeah.
okay.
I've been
So
there
my
before.
friend that was working there, oh yeah, it was not fun. That was I had just bought a house, like we had just got
Oh,
married. It was like the
sucks.
whole thing.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
from there, when you were let go, what happened? Did you go into a new full time job, or did you found Yellow Dog Party?
Well, right after that, the friend I had that was working there still in motion at Tampa Digital, he had another friend that he was from Sioux Falls, so he came down with another guy, and they went to like different companies when they came down here. The other guy was working at this company that was basically making like well, he worked at two places. I think he was making working on like arena graphics and also these like car commercials, and he was leaving that company to go full time to the arena one, the commercial place. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll take a shot at it. I'll whatever. And like that was not something I wanted to do. Obviously, like just
Yeah.
straight like local car commercials are not very fun or whatever. Um, but I went in there. I'm like, all right, I'll. I talked to the guy, like the guy that owned the company, and he was like a great guy. And I was like, all right, he's not bad. He's like, hey, why don't you come in here for like a day or two, see how it goes. We'll pay you, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, you take the money and you're set for whatever. I was like, okay, I'll do that. That's fair enough. So I went there, and it was actually all right. I had a good time. The other people that were there were great. The guy that owned the company was like a really really good guy, and he ended up offering me I think like 10,000 over what I was making a year
Oh
at
wow.
the other place. I'm like, all right, well maybe I failed upward. This
You won
might
the
be good.
lottery there.
So obviously, right, but obviously 2008 is right when that was going on, and like 2009 or something. That's when all the cars and all that stuff here like went to hell too. So that was like at that place, he hired me. He had to fire me, and then he hired me again later on when the other person went to the other. This is so weird.
Yeah.
The other guy that was working there decided to also go to the arena graphics place. I think he still works there. And so, because he's like, I have kids, I need something more stable. Like,
Yeah.
this is not great. He's like, you could take my position. I'm like, all right. So I went there, did that. Unfortunately, the owner of the company had cancer, and he was like, it was so sad. He was like the greatest dude. And right around Christmas time of that year or so, he died. And his wife took over the company, and like she was like psychotic, and so we did not jive. And so eventually, I had hired a friend of mine to work there, so she kept him instead, and I left, and I was like, all right, whatever. So after that, I tried some freelance stuff in between, like when I was in and out of that place, and I'm like, all right, I'm tired of like getting like just having all of these other factors like ruin whether or not I'm going to be employed. So I'm just going to
Right.
take care of it myself, and so about 2010 or so, I founded Yellow Dog
That's a really cool story because what I also like is that you've been able to stay. So you're from Tampa, correct?
Party.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
like you've been able to stay in your hometown, whereas like I meet so many, including myself. I had to move to London from Ireland, and you've been able to kind of stay
right.
within where you were brought up. Was that something you were determined to do, or did it just happen? Was it a happy accident?
Okay, when I was a kid, because I hate heat, so like my thing was like I am leaving this whole state. I cannot stand this. It's like everything is just not a fan. And so like throughout that, I when I went to college, I was gonna go somewhere else, but I was still gonna stay in state. Um, and I ended up just like I kind of I learned more about the history of my city for one thing, and I kind of
Mhm.
like fell in love with it in that aspect. And this was actually, I guess, through motion stuff too that I'd done because working at Tampa Digital, a lot of the things they did were kind of like these like not local. I can't. It's like a more like a historical type of stuff.
Yeah,
Like one of the guys I still work with, like used to do like documentaries and different things of like interesting stuff that happened here and whatever. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool.
cool.
And then our where we used to be at, we moved to the older part of the city, and like this like where all the cigar factories and stuff used to be, and all this stuff. I was like, all right, this is pretty cool. And my great grandmother actually worked in a cigar factory, so I'm like, all right, this is kind of neat. All right, I'll stay. And then yeah, so after that I was like, I kind of like didn't like that paradigm that everybody had to like go somewhere else and like move to
Yeah.
whatever. I'm like, I would really just rather somehow we have the internet now, like be able to just do something from here without having to move to like LA or New York or Chicago or something, you know.
Yeah. So many designers, motion designers flock to like hubs, and it's almost like a badge of honor if you can stay in your or close to or nearby your hometown and make something of yourself. Because
Yeah.
I guess I don't know. It seems like harder work, but like it's definitely worth it. Because I do know as I get older, going back home to Ireland is something that grows on me. I'm like, I wonder if I could make it there as well. But I guess as you said, we have the internet. Like most people are working remote now, which kind of brings me on to my
Yeah.
next topic. It's like how was most of your work as a freelancer or when you were starting up the studio? Were you like working on site with agencies, or were you kind of getting word of mouth stuff where you just kind of operating as a solo studio and just kind of grew from there?
Usually, when I first started out, I kind of it was like a mix. Like I never really did like long stints in a place.
Yeah.
There was like one place I went to that I like was in there, and I just thought it was felt awkward to me. Like I'm not I'm kind of I'm like one of those like introverted extroverted people.
Yeah,
So
I'm
like
the same.
with people that I'm familiar with or whatever, I can be like whatever, or like like I know like at Workbench I probably present like I'm super outgoing, whatever. But like, otherwise, I'm like, do I want to? I don't know this like, and that was a weird like situation where I like arrived like earlier than people sometimes, and I was like,
Hmm.
had to be like let into this building. It's like you never feel like you actually belong there.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, this is not really something I want to do. And so I kind of sought out more people that I'd like work remotely, whatever. And I eventually I had an office. And so then I was like, I'm not going to your place because I have my own place. I'm not going to pay
Hmm.
for this and go there, like so eventually I started to kind of stop being like freelance and kind of switch over to being like just a business. Like I prefer that more so than like, I'm not like a I transitioned basically from being like a hired gun for something like we need you for this
Yeah.
to being like this
Yeah.
is a product we need. Can you provide this video or whatever? So I mean I still do that kind of stuff from time to time, but it's still, it's not what I aim to do.
Yeah, I get that. Absolutely understand that. Because like it's really hard to present yourself as a business sometimes, and you end up being a freelancer, and sometimes you're just brought in to put out fires, and you're like, everything's a mess here, and I've just been brought in for the last week because they need to deliver in the next 48 hours, and I could be seen as the worst motion designer ever if I don't nail this in the next 48 hours. And it's just as you said, a really
Yeah.
awkward experience. Whereas I've always enjoyed more direct relationship with clients where you're trying to build a relationship and you're trying to solve a problem, or you like
Yeah.
have outcomes and goals. It's like, did you get more sales? Did more people click the video?
I mean, that still happens from time to time too, like where you like get sidelined into something weird. But I generally now I know that that's coming instead of like just being a surprise on it. Like I've had that happen to me where like, or even Sev too, both of us like working on things of like we've been ambushed into things and we're like, okay,
Oh
let's
no.
never let that happen again.
It
So,
sometimes always
but
creeps up with us and happens again.
yeah, there's always some like red flag you missed. You're like, oh man, why didn't I notice that? Like I shouldn't have done this. Now I'm
Yeah,
in
yeah.
this, and
So like with everything going on, like you must have been super busy. Like you're just kind of getting out of that kind of freelance stereotype, trying to start a business, trying to build direct client relationships. You said you're a dad. I don't know how old your kids are. What on earth motivated you to start a YouTube channel on top of it all, and build out a store? Because that must have taken a lot of work and trying to divide your time.
yeah. So there was like a long time ago when I think Nick Campbell was like starting to do his stuff.
Yeah,
I would like watch his stuff while I was working on different things, or whatever. I was like still working at the car commercial place, which was actually I didn't mention this before, but that was actually a good job to have taken because I learned to be really fast at things. So
yeah, yeah.
because we did so many spots, like I did like probably like 400 spots in like a year or two,
That's sick.
just like something like a new look of something every day. So it was kind of crazy, but but anyway, during that time period, I would watch that or like just different stuff, and like my friend was working, like he was like right behind me, so we would sit there and like during lunch or whatever, like, watch some video or like, oh, this person posted this or this was on this or oceanographer had this piece about something or whatever. So, at some point, Nick started to do like, this is like right when he was beginning, he started to like pass off his stream to people. And I think it was like there was a time that's where I learned about Sam Welker too, because he was on there too at the same time. And I think he took over, and I was like, oh man, I wish I would have had the time to do this, but I was working on something. I'm like, oh, that would have been kind of interesting to like teach something. And so then I was like, all right, maybe I should do that at some point, like try to actually, teach people stuff. And I was thinking initially about doing like just like a beginner stuff, because again, even when Nick started, there wasn't much stuff available.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like there's like 3 or 4 people like doing quality stuff. And I'm like, man, I could fit some stuff in here or whatever. But then as I like when I finally got around to it, everybody was doing it. Like everything, like everything had like tutorials, and that's why we started to do ones that were more advanced. Because I was like, all right, maybe I could we don't need another like 50 tutorials teaching somebody how to do something by like, all right, let's open up this menu and click on this and whatever. So that's why all of our stuff has none of that in it. So roughly, I guess once I left that company, um, the car commercial place, and then and I started, my career doing different things or whatever, my own business and whatever. Then we had I worked out of another place for a former Tampa Digital guy, started a separate company. I worked like out of his place, helping him start his company, and then like I had like office space there, and then we left there and worked at I got my own office. So I was sitting there, I think one time, it was kind of slow at the end of a year. And I was like, man, I really got to do something or fill some time here or something, or like, even like
Typical
Workbench
entrepreneur.
started as a way to like, right. It started as a way to give back, but also like, maybe I can get my name out there. And we kind of like went along with my, like, I want to stay in Tampa. I need work to come in at some point, like in like the next year. Maybe I can, like drum up some stuff, or at least get some things going. And I started experimenting, writing scripts and different things. I was like, all right, well, I could probably sell this stuff and whatever, so I could share some knowledge, but maybe also get something back from doing these things. So that's why it started then. And I think man, I think that was right before my daughter was born, I believe. So it was right before I lost all of my time.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I started a YouTube channel just before my daughter was born as well. And I wonder if it's that, like,
Right.
I've got to do more to make a presence online or get people interested or just build my brand. Is it like a weird survival
Right.
thing? You're like, I've got to make this bigger than it
Maybe.
is. Maybe it is. I don't know. And I'm there like, you know, trying to edit a tutorial, trying to like bottle feed and whatnot. Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, but I almost feel, I don't know if you found this, becoming a dad makes you almost more efficient with your time. You don't kind of waste
Mhm.
time as much because your time is limited, so you're almost more efficient for
Yeah.
clients in a sense.
Hmm. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, that, but also like, priorities of things to change or whatever. And switch around. Like Workbench kind of tapered down as both Sev and I had kids roughly at the same time, and then just the demands of the time from them, as they get older and more like, like grown people or whatever, like
yeah, yeah,
they need more stuff, and then you're too tired to like do things. So I was like, all right, well, maybe we switch this around to like not doing weekly tutorials
yeah,
anymore.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because
Weekly tutorials are
yeah,
hard, man.
it was
They're very hard.
yeah. Oh, it was crazy because I was like, I'd concept something, and then I'd have to like, okay, now I got to present this, and then like, I got to show this in a way that people aren't going to complain at me again about like, oh, this wasn't shown, this wasn't shown. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I get those comments like, oh, well, I wish you would show every single thing about it. I'm like, all right, well, like this isn't designed for somebody that's never touched After
yeah,
Effects, even though like I kept getting people like that, and I'm like, I don't have time to sit here and like go through and do it while I'm doing. Like, it's so much easier for me, and like I like learning better. I like, to me it's about the concept, not about
yeah,
like
yeah.
how did you do that or whatever, like the entire time. So I'm like, oh, they did this, okay, cool, I can go play with that and make my own thing now. So like everybody else wants it just like, oh, well, can you show us exactly the way? I'm like, well, if I did that, it'd be like a 4-hour tutorial of me rambling half the time, like, oh, why isn't this working, or why is that, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
doing all that kind
exactly.
of stuff. Or I'd spend like 8 hours editing it. I'm like, I don't have time to do that.
Yeah. And
So
there was plenty of like, there's so many channels out there anyway that were like for beginners and stuff. I think your channel was perfect at hitting a gap, which your channel helped me loads because it seemed really motion focused, and like, and then you had a bit of like live action stuff in there, but it wasn't like a bunch of compositing. It was like, how can we take this live action footage and do something more interesting with it? And there was definitely, I don't,
right.
if it was conscious, but you definitely filled a gap in the market at the time.
No, I mean, that's part of that was okay. So when I first started Workbench, I had like I said, I think I mentioned this before somewhere, but like it was almost kind of like being too dumb to like realize, like what you're getting yourself into. Like I had
Yeah.
like maybe three or four like great ideas. I'm like, oh, this will be good. Like nobody does this, or like this is something. And then like, you know, in like because I started that in like December, and I started posting them in like January, I think. But like February, I'm like, what am I gonna do next? So I'm like, I'm trying to set this bar now like so high. I'm like, this needs to be like super technical or whatever.
Yeah.
And then like I'm like, all right, well now I got to figure that out. So it kind of helped me too, because like it made me think of things differently. Like I stopped trying to be like, okay, let's build this particular thing. I started to be like, let's see how we can break After Effects and like do
Yeah.
something like you've never done before in it, and what can we do with that. Um, so that's kind of why those things happen. I'm like, okay, you could use this to do that or whatever. To me, it was interesting. It was kind of like it was almost like that the art, like the fine art background that I had kind of led into that. Like I didn't really
Mhm.
think about that until like probably just now, but like that's kind of what I was doing with it. It was playing more about like how can I do things with this program it's not intended to do, or how can I do like interesting stuff that like you don't, I'm not just animating a thing, I'm trying to like do something. And like
Yeah.
it's even talking to Seth sometimes, he's like, why would you want to do that? I'm like, I don't know, just to see if I can. Like, sometimes it's just like to be interesting, like it's like an academic exercise, and can this do this? I don't know.
Yeah, I
So
love that isometric one you do, where it's like you're basically building like these 3D isometric shapes, and you're like my first thought watching it was like, oh, you could do that in Cinema 4D so easily. But I see what he's trying to do. He's trying to like push the software to a point of like, let me just see how far I can push this, which is really cool. I have a close friend of mine actually who's
yeah.
like very technical at 3D, and he does the exact same, but with Cinema 4D. He tries to create
Hmm.
these ridiculous pulley string systems. And what did he do? He tried to create a foosball, interactive foosball game in Cinema 4D, and he succeeded. And he said, if I ever went back to try and do that again, I wouldn't have a clue how to do it.
Yeah, well, that's another reason why we started making tutorials too. Is like sometimes it's just to help me remember
Yeah,
like
yeah.
something I came up with like 3 years ago, and I don't remember what it was or whatever.
Because you want to get it right and you don't want to be kind of embarrassed online of getting something wrong. So I've almost been forced to like,
Mhm.
okay, before I upload this tutorial, I want to read all the documentation, make sure I'm not talking, absolute smoke here.
Some of the things I found out, like I can't. I mean, I'm sure there's something I've been wrong on. I can't remember a specific like thing, but like sometimes it's like there isn't a bit in the manual about why something does that or whatever.
Yeah.
So like sometimes you're like, why does this do that? Like actually, there was something I never did a bug report on or whatever. But they're like in After Effects, for example, this is technical, I guess, but they're like the noise function. It's only supposed to return, I think, from like -1 to 1 or whatever. But like
Yeah.
there was a time that I started getting results that were outside of that. I'm like, why is this doing that? Like I got like 1.5. I'm like, how does like why? And like so like sometimes even in my tutorials I'll be like, I don't know why it does this. So here you go. Like if you know why, like figure it out. And
Yeah.
it's weird.
What are your feelings around AI? Have you used any of the tools? Are you kind of resistant towards it? Do you feel it's an existential crisis? What's your feelings and kind of thoughts around it?
All of the above. So um God, I every once in a while, like okay, so I started using Mid Journey like roughly like when it came out. Somehow I got it like I think it was like invite only at that time period. I got like somehow I got into it. I don't know how it worked out, but I started using because I'm like, all right, I need to keep an eye on this because this could be game changing or it could
Yeah.
be whatever. And like I look at things that I started like then it was like a year or some change. It was like literally like at the beginning. Like I look at stuff that was like from then to now. I'm like, okay, this is not going to go well.
Hmm.
So and then Chat GPT and all of the things that it can do, and then like the like GPT-4 comes out, and I'm looking at all this stuff. I'm like, I think people have like 2 years before like nothing is done by people, and I'm like, and then I was looking at something. I'm like, well, I was in my head. I'm like, okay, well at least like people have to get stuff places and people can drive, and then like you see all these like electric vehicles and
Yeah.
different things like able to drive themselves or do whatever. And then I saw like the new Tesla robot stuff where they're like picking up and sorting things. I'm like,
What the hell?
game over.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Good game, but it's weird. I saw something yesterday that was kind of an interesting point about it. That was like because what's the end result? Like if nobody is able to work because everything is AI or everything is, robots or
Exactly.
whatever, like at some point you need to, like there's no point. There's nobody's able to pay for the thing, so
Yeah,
then
yeah,
you can't use it, so it's like maybe it balances in some way. I don't know, but like in between, I've been using it for whatever I can to like either make my work faster for something. Like a lot of times it's helpful for like we've been doing some 3D spots where like I'll need a painting or something in the background, and it's like, well, I don't really need to make a painting, and I
yeah.
can't, if I need to get something, whatever, I don't have to like find something, clear it, whatever. So some things like that, it helps. And just like interesting things you can do with it. I have seen like people do stuff that's kind of like outside of what you would think. There was one I was thinking about this. I never did anything on it, but there was I think it was, I can't remember how you say his name, like Matty Hapuja or Hapuja.
I think I know who you're
The guy
talking
that
about. Yeah, yeah.
he's always with Peter McKinnon and whatever, like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
really
yeah,
good
yeah, yeah.
photography guy.
Yeah,
He
it's cool.
did
Yeah,
he did one where he like extended his set, was kind of neat. Like he like had his desk and like extended out to like windows and different things. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So it has some interesting applications for stuff like that, or just like paint out stuff or whatever. That's helpful. Like sometimes it saves me time on just like, oh, I would need something for this, whatever. And I've also been using it in other ways. Like one of our elements for Patreon that we made, that I like generated a bunch of like glitchy looking art, and then I just like threw them all together and modified it, and then
yeah.
made it to where it could like make some glitches in After Effects out of it. So it's like it's using the machine to glitch the machine, man. I don't know, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
it's
So,
it's like Inception with glitch art. It's very cool.
mhm,
Yeah,
yeah.
I guess for me, I don't know where it's going to go, and I think the one thing it's going to struggle with for a while, and maybe your two-year marker is where it stops struggling with that, is context. So like trying to like create the right car ad that sells the car in the right way. I think it's a little bit away from that, but it's close. It's
Mhm,
definitely close enough to replace people eventually. And then I guess I try and be. I'm always
mhm.
trying to have a positive spin off, and I'm like, oh yeah, we'll get replaced, but maybe we'll just be owned by robot overlords, and we'll just get to make art in our spare time. That would be great.
And I mean, who knows?
Yeah,
I mean, it literally can be anything. I feel like I see people like I tend to be optimistic about things. Like
yeah,
to
yeah,
me, like no matter what, I'm going to be fine. I just don't know what the future is. Like
yeah.
I saw somebody's comment on Twitter, like at some point, or X or whatever it is now, it's where they said like they felt this like feeling of dread or whatever, and I'm like, I think what that is really just like when I was a kid, like you knew what you were going to do. Like I'm going to do this, or like at
Yeah.
least they're like I'm gonna have the family, the car, or whatever, like
Yeah.
whatever it is. And like now it's just like
Yeah,
I don't know
what
what's coming up.
happens? Yeah.
Like things are so
Maybe
crazy and like that's going on. Yeah, who knows?
maybe it's like a purpose thing. Maybe we're afraid I think that's my thing. Maybe I'm afraid I'm going to lose purpose as an artist. I think that's the biggest dread. But if I knew if
Yeah,
even if I knew I was going to be replaced by AI, if I knew I could just have my costs covered and have a happy life and just make art or YouTube videos, how bad?
yeah,
I think I think you're right. It's the unknowns and the dread that people have more than hating on the AI itself.
yeah. I mean, like whatever. If that's the future of everything and whatever, I mean, sure. It's like you said, as long as we have like I got food and whatever. I mean, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
It's just
exactly.
I don't know. I did. There was something that is interesting that you said though too about the context of stuff. While I think that does matter, I think that's also a mindset of people that are like older.
Okay.
Like because when I look at like things of like memes and different things, like if you look at like obviously memes and things like that break down like in ages and whatever, and like
Yeah, 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 yeah.
the more realistic stuff or whatever, like all of that is like a like to people like of our generation and like older. I feel like because like younger people like
Yeah,
some of the
that's a
things
good
like
point.
when it's messed up, like oh like the AI guy has 6 fingers, oh well, it's funny, it's like it's funny and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
interesting, or like that weird like beer ad that somebody made where it was like all the people like and everything's on fire.
Um,
I don't know if you saw that one, but it's like to me like that could actually be a spot at some point because it's not about like being perfect or real or whatever to sell the thing. It's more like, oh, look at this interesting crazy thing, isn't it interesting? I'm like, I don't know that it matters as much that the quality of things aren't as good because like people don't care about quality if it's funny or if it's interesting in some other fashion.
yeah, I'd agree
I
with that. I think
hate
that's
to
a
be
really good point.
killing people on it.
I think, yeah. But I think that's a really good point because there was a moment I was working in an agency about 6 years ago, and
Mhm.
this really cool piece came out. It was like a retro mixed media, but it was doing everything in PS1 graphics. And there was a designer who turned to me. He was like, he was always about high end fidelity 3D. And like you said,
Mhm.
the aesthetic is only part of the problem. There's so many other like gears to fixing things, like tools you need. And he just
Mhm.
didn't understand why this was released. Like, this is terrible. This is PS1 graphics. Why would anyone like this? I was like, it's because it's retro to a whole different generation who don't understand that this was low
Mhm.
fidelity.
And you're also even once in a while now too, you even see like older formats come back a little bit too, like square format stuff and all sorts of different,
Yeah.
like 4:3 like graphics and stuff.
How'd you find lockdown? Because you do kind of a mixture of stuff, don't you? You do some like videography mixed in with motion graphics. How did you find it as a studio?
Mhm.
I guess you were like you had a lot of clients already established. Did you have any struggles through lockdown?
Not so much. So what's interesting is that we're like partnered up with people that do production.
Okay,
So like a
cool.
lot of the people I knew here did production. So when they didn't do production, they were like, we need to do graphics again. So here
Yeah,
you go. Here's all this stuff. And like the only thing that was annoying about that time period is like people also tried to, I think, like use it as a way to like save money on things as well. So
hmm,
like it wasn't that this production budget got translated into an animation budget. It was that the production budget, like, well, we don't need to do as much now because we could just do like half of whatever, and here you go. And so we were like busier than we were. I'm not saying this is my clients doing this. Is like like end companies doing whatever, I think, or just how it worked out.
yeah.
But we had a lot of work, but then I looked at the end of it and I'm like, I did like way better like last year. So I don't, So I'm sitting here like, I don't know if that was so worth it. Like whatever, but it wasn't terrible as far as that goes. We don't do a ton of shooting. I mean, I try to, but that's not like like that would also involve me having to like drum up clients while I'm in the middle of working on things. And we did do a couple of shoots during that time period though, but it wasn't like right in the beginning of it. I can't think of like what all here. I mean, I'm in Florida, so like we were kind of open like early, so it
Yeah.
wasn't so terrible. People were still like the only about the worst thing you'd have is like masking on set because it's like and it's like
Yeah.
hot as hell outside. um,
Yeah.
the God, like there was some that we did where you had to like test and do different things or whatever.
Yeah.
I was a VFX supervisor for a couple of Tom Brady Hertz commercials,
Not too
so
bad.
that one was interesting because that was like near the end of everything too. But we still ended up having to wear masks because I think SAG hadn't changed anything, and there was some SAG actors on the set. So everybody's there, and then they're like, "Oh no, we all have to wear masks." And we're like, and we're like filming in this like parking garage, and it's like 100. like
Yeah,
it's
yeah. That's roasting. Oh
it
my
was
god.
like the hottest. Like everybody's like sweaty and like everything, and we're all just like breathing and we're like, okay. Um, but yeah, other than that, I mean, we shot a thing in Denver, um, and that was interesting too. That was actually before, I think it was before the Tom Brady one, or in between a set of them. That one I was directing on that one, and that one we were surprised about that one because at the time, I mean, like all the media is crazy about like, oh, Florida's terrible, and this
Yeah.
is, it's so whatever over here. And it's like we're like we didn't know what to expect because we hadn't really gone anywhere. But like flying wasn't too bad, and like like in Denver, like we expected Denver like from the stuff that we'd seen to be like more strict about things
Yeah.
or whatever, and it was similar to here. It was interesting because that was another one. They were like, yeah, we're gonna that I think everybody was tested on that one or something, but we're not gonna mask because we're gonna mask because we're all in this place, but then after that we don't need to in this because we're shooting in a house, and they're like we're like, oh no, we have to do it, and then the person who owns the house like, I don't care, you can do whatever.
Yeah.
So they're like,
Most
well,
people
don't
are
take any
pretty chill
pictures.
about
I'm
it,
like,
weren't they?
all right, guys. It was very
Yeah.
weird time because it's like
Yeah, so
because
strange.
it also got wrapped up with a whole bunch of political stuff and all
Oh
sorts
my
of whatever,
god,
but
yeah, it
like
was ridiculous.
yeah, yeah, it was crazy. But like, so yeah, because that was the thing. They're like, oh well, okay, well you guys can, because we had like I think that was like a COVID coordinator or whatever on set for that one, and they're like, oh well, okay, fine, we don't have to do it, but I don't want it. We can't have a single photo on anything. Nobody take a photo without a mask on, or well, like if we did put a mask on, I'm like, but I know what would happen because like
stuff, wasn't there? Like people didn't know how to react. People were afraid to be outed. Businesses were afraid they were going to be shut down.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, and you can't have a person that does COVID stuff on set, and then they're like on the set that they're shooting on, then everybody's like maskless in photos. So I get it, because then people would be like, "Oh, what are you doing?" But it's like the overreareaction to it is the crazier part to me.
I think it was the second lockdown. After third lockdown in the UK, I was like, I think even I don't know. I'd like to see go outside and enjoy myself, even if I'm going to die at this point, because the strain on mental health at one point, I was like, it's not worth it.
Well, and that's what's crazy about it to me. I'm like, I'm sitting here, like, again, I'll watch like the media on different things, and like I'm sitting here, like everybody's like, this happened in Florida, everybody's gonna die, and I'm like, and I'm looking here, and I'm looking around, and like it's like normal life here, and like nobody's
21
like,
days later,
people again here. We stopped doing lockdown, like we only had one, and it was like a few weeks, and then after that, like I'd see stuff from places, and they're still like not allowed to go do things or go outside, or like people attacking people on beaches and stuff. Like, get back in here! Like, you're the only person on the beach. Like that to me, when I was watching this stuff, I'm like, this is crazy. Like, I get being cautious about a disease you don't know about, or about whatever. Like, because obviously there are people that had complications that were perfectly fine, and whatever. But like, but then you see like a dude alone someplace with nobody around him outside. I'm like, all right, that level's crazy. Like, like there was like a dude in California, I think, that was like surfing, and they like cops like arrested him or tried to,
I saw that. That was crazy. It's nuts.
I'm like, what are you doing? Like, like, and then here at the same time, there's like people having like rave parties on beaches and stuff.
Oh, like, I mean, okay. London was like full of these.
Can we just get to the non-extreme
stuff? Like it was. People were like having raves on canal boats and stuff. Like they were like, and they would have it on the canal boat, so the canal boat would move, so they were always on the move, so they couldn't be caught. It was nuts.
That's pretty funny, actually.
yeah. Proper British intuition there.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I was talking to Augustine Aguia, and he was like, he's in Belgium, and he was like, he would be walking around, like he'll call us sometimes when he's walking the dog or whatever, and he's like, he's like, there are like parties, and like he's like, oh, these people, he's like, what is going on here? Because they were having like super strict stuff, and every time they like something would happen, they would do even more strict stuff. And he's like minding his business, walking around. He's like, there's like a party going on in the woods over here, and there's like thousands of people, like, just as he's walking by. I'm like, I don't know, man.
Rave culture was revived because of lockdown. That's my belief.
Yeah, that's what ended up happening. It's like speakeasies almost, in a way.
Yeah, that's quite. Yeah, that's interesting. What are your like which is kind of a good segue, because we just had a bit of a rant about it. What are your biggest gripes with the industry? Because I've read your blog, and what I like about you is like you just talk about the points, and you there's no bullshit, basically. You like to cut through the shit. You don't like to fluff stuff up. But I'm sure you've come across stuff that has been massive gripes for you, or tropes of the industry. What are they? How have you tried to overcome them? Have you tried to beat them? I'm kind of interested in that.
Well, I mean, one thing that I don't like is people wasting people's time. So anybody that wastes my time in the industry is like, I'm like, I don't want to work with you again. It's like, people that can't respect your, what you're doing, or any of that kind of stuff, that just drives me nuts. It's like, all right, but that's partially too one reason why I run my stuff more as a business than a freelancer, because I feel like as a freelancer, like, even though technically there's no real difference, like you're just like thought of not as like, you're just thought of as like a hired hand, in this thing, versus like, we're partnering with this company to do this or whatever, so like I try to do all the things to protect my time. Like I have the article in the WorkBench blog that's basically about how, like, ways you could protect your time by like saying like, okay, here's this thing, I will be able to change that for you tomorrow or whatever, so that you're not sitting there like waiting on them to get you stuff, and like, and then you get stuck there working all night because people send you revisions over and over and over again or whatever. So that's probably my biggest gripe with the way people treat people, and it's very refreshing when you get people that are the opposite. Like
Hmm.
I recently worked on this other project where I knew it was a rush, I knew it was going to be crazy, and everybody on that project, like every other time I've done a rush project like that, everybody's been like crazy and like, oh, whatever, or no, we got to do this or we got to do that or whatever. And like these people were like, hey, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, they don't have time. There's not a,
That's cool.
you don't like, we're not expecting you to be here to like 2 a.m. to do this just so that we can, tell the client like, yeah, we could do it. So I was like, hey, that's nice. Like the yes man thing, I don't like, and that company was like completely not that way, which was great. So
Yeah. No. And kind of what areas of the industry do you see time wasting happen more? Like, is it more like, I guess I personally I experience it less if I have a direct relationship. If I'm sometimes working through like a
right,
daisy chain of partners, that's when it's the worst usually. And it's usually I find
yeah,
I always try and empathize with people in that situation, even though it's really hard because it's usually an anxiety on their behalf that they're wasting your time. They're like, oh, can you just change it? And it's almost like trying to overfix something that isn't broken or something. Like, is there any sectors in particular
yeah.
you've noticed it more?
I get that a lot with agencies.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that's always my thing. If I know an agency is involved, I know it's going to be like more difficult because you get some of that in that culture of like, there's always like I almost always find like a yes man type person in there, like, oh yeah, we could do that or whatever, and then like without asking you or like, hey, is this possible or whatever. Like it's very
All
rare.
the
Like this
time.
last project was great as far as that goes, and there were people involved, whatever. I've been involved with ones where they're like multiple agencies,
Oh
like, and then
god.
they compete with each other because like this one wants to change something before they send it to this one, and then they're like, well, no, we got to do this, and you're like, can we just send something to the client? Like I've never
Yeah.
had a situation where I sent something off to a client, to like one of my own clients directly, and they're just like, this is so terrible, we're done with this, we'll, like
Yeah, yeah. I've never understand
they'll
that way of
just say like,
thinking.
no, I don't know. It's like it's the communication aspect, and I think it's also partially like, especially when the economy is going really well, that's a little less of that because people are less afraid of losing the business, I guess.
Hmm.
But like when things are bad or like in certain situations, whatever, people are like too afraid to send it. It's like, oh no, it has to be perfect before we send it. I'm like, nobody's expecting you to get it like
Yeah,
100% right out of the gate. Like that never happens. It's not a thing. So just
yeah,
send something like and explain. Like use your word. Like to me, it's an opportunity to like work with your client. Like I
yeah,
don't
yeah. I
understand
agree.
from their aspect of like, oh no, we want to send them something that's great. It's like don't build the relationship. Like I am bringing this to you. This is what I think is this should be. But like how do you see it? Like is there something different that you want to do with it? Did I take this the
Yeah,
wrong way? Is it not in your brain? Like whatever. Like you can have the conversation about that because then it seems like you care about it versus like,
yeah,
here's what we made for you. Hope you like it. Like that there's no opportunity for dialogue with that. Like use that. Like I don't I don't know. To me, a lot of those things like people don't think through like as they should, I guess,
I
and
agree.
use
I think
those
that
to
kind
their
of
advantage.
that's an opportunity, as you said, to problem solve, to figure stuff out. And it's, as you said, the dialogue is vital to like figuring out if this is on track. I had a situation 6 months ago where an actual director said to me, oh, we don't want to waste the next day because I wasn't hitting the mark immediately. And I
Mm,
probably shouldn't have said this. I probably said, no time is wasted at the moment because we're working towards something to figure out what you need and what you require. He didn't.
yeah,
I don't think he took it very well. But like, I'd rather work with someone who took that for what it is and just
yeah.
worked with
They
me rather
should.
than
That's a
saying,
great response.
yeah, rather than going, oh, we're wasting all this time because you're too impatient to try and figure it out with me. Because I'm trying to figure this out with you. I'm not a tool for you to just use and get it right first time. That's not how this works. And I
Right.
definitely find with clients, they are more responsive to someone who is willing to, which is why I never charge for amends. I think is a horrible business model unless it gets out of hand, of course. Is you
Hmm.
want to work with the client, right?
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's a partnership. It's not a like I'm not a store selling stuff, and I'm also like you said, I'm not like a hammer that just somebody can sit here and like use to like bang in whatever nail they need. That's not like why are you hiring me in that case? If you like know what it is and you want it whatever way, why are you hiring me to do it? Just do it.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
hire somebody else to work in your company that you could break however you want.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
like, yeah. I find that when I'm like, I'm not. I had a friend that I worked with for a while, and he was like, not a. I wouldn't say he's like a yes man, but like he was always like trying to like do whatever that and then I was like, yeah, I just tell him like, no, it's not possible, or no, you can't do that, or like here's another solution for that, or this is why I did it this way. Do you still
Yeah.
want to do it that way? Like at least like you're showing you're thinking about it,
Hmm.
and I found that like people respect me more when I actually give that to them like that versus like if I was just like, yeah, cool, we could do it that way or whatever. I mean, even
Yeah,
if I
yeah.
do something like, I always make sure to mention these things too when I'm working with people. Like if they're sitting there and they're like, yeah, we need this thing like tomorrow or whatever, and if I'm able to do it, I'll do it. But I also tell them like, yeah, I I will find some way to mention like, yeah, this was a rush. Like we can't always do it this way or whatever, or just
Mhm.
like I was able to do it this way, or like I'll mention it in some fashion that it's not like that's not the standard thing I do, so that next time
Yeah.
they're not like, okay, cool, here's another project that we need in 2 minutes. you know.
Yeah, exactly. Do you use contracts actually? So how do you set boundaries with clients and agencies? Like what are the tools you use? Is it contracts? Is it emails? Is it just direct communication?
It's kind of a combo. If it, I've had some clients that requested a contract. I try to, and I know this is not the greatest way to do it, but I try to not deal with that
Yeah.
as much. Like I will give people like, hey, this is my like estimate. This is what's involved in it. I give them like a layout of what they're going to get, what it is, like how it's going to work, a timeline, whatever, all of those things, and then it's whatever emails between us that
Mhm.
work out. Because I find at least with contract type stuff, like half the time you're dealing with somebody who legally has no idea of what is in that thing. They just do
Yeah.
that because that's their contract.
Yeah.
Um, and I see those a lot of times where it's like very lopsided because like a lot of times if you read the contracts, most people like the standard thing is to take ownership of everything. And they're
Yeah.
like, okay, well, this is that. My reply whenever I get one of those is always like, I can't do that because I have all of the other stuff that I do development wise for Workbench and all of my other things that I do. And these are also like,
Yeah. Yeah.
if I give you everything to this project, I can't use those later on to develop something else like a plugin or a script or something that I'm going to do based on the knowledge that I got from building this project. So
Mhm.
I've actually generally had people like they're like, oh, okay, whatever. There's a company that I work with locally every once in a while that they actually were like, okay, cool, yeah, we don't need to have that or whatever. It's like they're like, well, what do you do instead? I'm like, well, normally what I do is I make the product, I own the thing, and I license it to you to use in perpetuity in whatever fashion you want, even if you
Cool.
want to remix it or do whatever. So
That's interesting.
generally, like if I explain that to people, they're like, "Oh, okay," or they'll run it by a lawyer, and they're like, "All right." But yeah, I mean, usually the most of my clients at this point are like more established that we don't
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
need that kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Of
know
course. Yeah. Yeah.
stuff to keep going. Like we'll just like write out like, okay, this is what we need, or this is the thing, and they're like, okay, cool. So
That's really cool. I think more designers, motion designers, just creatives in general should have that attitude of just willing to negotiate, willing to like maybe question things. I agree with you on the yes man thing. There's just too many people that are afraid to question something, and it creates a culture
yeah,
in our industry that is a little bit toxic at times. And this isn't obviously, I'm not like kind of, putting down the VFX industry, but because
yeah,
of that culture, they've ended up in this trap where they have to work to fix costs. And now they're in
mhm,
this horrid situation where there's strikes going on. And, it's
yeah,
almost like if they negotiate things like royalties earlier or like they push back. And obviously, it's a much harder situation that because you only have what like five publishers in the world that own everything, so it's a much more difficult. But there are
right,
situations that if you push back earlier, you make life easier for you and the client. It's like in the client's interest because if you're saying yes all the time
yeah.
and they're getting it wrong, you're just going to mess up the whole project.
That's right. I mean, and sometimes too, I can't. I won't say that like that's never backfired on me. In fact, like I've never
Yeah,
lost a gig because of something, but like at the same time, like sometimes you end up in these situations and then like the contract could really screw you over later in other ways like you
yeah,
don't even mean to use something that was there and they're like, oh well, that was what you did for us or whatever. They're like, great, my techniques are mine, so I'm sorry if that's gonna not make this relationship work, but that's what it is. Like as far as that goes too, like NDAs, I don't generally sign those. There was an
Yeah.
article that was about that was really good,
Oh, they're
about like
ridiculous.
how can you sign
Every
something before
project's
you
an
know what it
NDA.
is. Yeah, well, there was a person that wanted to talk to us about something once, and it was like, he's like, hey, I have this thing I want to talk to you about, can we sign an NDA? I'm like, I don't do those, sorry. And then eventually he's like, well, I'll talk to you about it like once it's more further along or whatever. I'm like, okay. And it basically ended up being something very similar to what we were doing with Element Supply Company. I'm like, well, good thing I didn't talk about that, otherwise we wouldn't be
Cool.
able to do this anymore.
Very
So
cool.
it's like, sometimes like you don't know what's coming down, and you need to reserve all the rights that you have before you just give them away, and then you're screwed.
I feel like you've had experience to present yourself like that. So kind of that brings me on to a question that's popped into my head. Have you come across any situations that, there was IP law, or where you've had to defend yourself like legally, or have you just learned this, through research and development, and you're like, okay, I know what I have to do not to get screwed?
I mean, time and experience is
Yeah.
I haven't had to defend anything in any situation where that's come up. But just like I've seen other people that have had to do that kind of stuff, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, let's learn something from that or whatever.
Fly on the wall.
Like I said about contracts and whatever, I'm not opposed to contracts. It's just like you got to read them, and it's just that back and forth of the whole thing where, for me, I mean, especially if we're doing a quick thing or whatever, like like what am I really out, as long as I'm only out costs or whatever, like I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, I mean, and in that case too, most of our ones where we do have contracts are like bigger budgets and different things, or like big shoots or whatever. um but yeah, thankfully I've not run into a situation where I've had to do that, but I mean, I've been burned on other things in the past of just seeing what people have had to deal with.
What benefits? So you started the YouTube channel. It's been a really good success. You had the shop and all stuff. But what benefits to you personally, to your career, has it given you that you didn't actually foresee or plan?
I didn't foresee. Interesting. Well, I didn't think it was gonna. I wouldn't say a blow up, because I'm not like a huge YouTuber guy or whatever, I guess. But like,
Yeah.
to just have,
Well,
have
it's 64 subs, or it's quite big for our sector.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want that 100. I get it, but I gotta, I have to actually make some.
Yeah. No, I'm rooting for you, man. Hundreds to one.
I know the potential that's out there to get, a bunch of views and different things from it because of people I've seen or whatever. But one that I didn't foresee. I mean, I don't want to be like, oh, well, I knew that this was going to happen. I mean, to me, it's just like the end result of doing things is, this stuff comes to you or whatever, like, and I've seen that happen with tons of other YouTube channels of different types and whatever. I'm like, you just got to be consistent making content and doing all that kind of stuff for that to happen. But like, as far as what I guess what I didn't really expect is like how, I wouldn't say easy, because it obviously was a lot of work, but like it feels easy. But because like it's not like a difficult formula to find. Like you make stuff and then people see it and they're like, oh, cool, and to like get known in the industry, I feel like was an interesting thing. I mean, obviously there's people that still don't know who I am or whatever, but like to the people that I watched Aaron Rabinowitz and now he knows who I am, so like I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like that was stuff I didn't really anticipate happening or whatever. And it's just like, I mean, it was neat, like that whole aspect of it. But like I felt like some things like that would happen just from making stuff. I mean, that was the reason why I was doing WorkBench, other than like to give back to the community and also to get myself like out there. So I mean, it's just like in the ways that it worked out, I didn't anticipate it. Like I thought it would take longer. But I guess in my head too, I'm also probably compressing the timeline, because it was a while making videos before like they'd be like, oh, cool, whatever. But yeah, that aspect was cool. So I mean, that was a neat.
That's pretty cool.
Neat thing.
Yeah, I guess for myself, I didn't. When starting the YouTube channel, like it definitely gave me a newfound confidence in my ability, in ways I didn't know I had, which was nice. I felt I could actually, like the start of my first few videos, as everyone, they're awful. Like I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing on my formula and stuff, but it gave me like tools and formulas and ways to think about how to talk and communicate about like what I do, which is you know, cool. Never thought I'd be talking to Joe Clay from Workbench, which is quite cool as well.
That's it. I hear anybody say that. So
yeah. Well, you know when you're watching someone like over and over again, it's like, because I used to kind of like use these tutorials a lot, and I never thought, oh, I'm going to make a YouTube channel and just talk to Joe one day. So like, it's quite cool. It's worked out that way.
Honestly, that's something I didn't expect. People that have said that like I've inspired them to do like tutorials. I'm not saying that was you. I'm just saying like in general, I've had a couple of people.
Yeah, you're definitely one of the people.
And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like that, I didn't anticipate. So I mean, that's something that really that's pretty neat. I mean, like Ben Marriott has told me that. I'm like, all right. I'm like, well, I'm glad. Go
Ben Marriott. That's sick.
Go get your success king.
I know he's like the.
No, I mean, he's awesome. So I can't. I'm like, all right, cool. Yeah, if you want to tell people that.
This is kind of a quick fire question, just a kind of a fun one, I guess. Last question is: if you were starting out fresh and you didn't have put yourself in a situation where you didn't have much knowledge of what tools are industry standard, because there's so much snobbery around software that does my head in. It's like, use what you like, use what you know. What would you learn now? Would you learn anything different? Is there any particular software you go, I want to learn that if I was like, had the time at 22, 23?
Well, honestly, probably Houdini. But I also think that's a specialized tool for specialized people. So, and actually, see, this is why it's hard, because as we were talking about the YouTube stuff too, something I also didn't anticipate about that is that I would learn more things by doing, you know, like I mean, obviously it sounds obvious, like you'd learn more stuff by doing it, but by being forced to do a video every week because that was my schedule.
I get that.
Like I learned so much more about After Effects or different things or whatever, you know, even cinema or whatever. So I don't know that I would have known that, like, that I would want to do Houdini at the outset, because like in my head, I'm like, oh, 3D is cool. You know, like, oh, well, I would learn cinema or Maya or something, whatever. But like, to know the aspect of like what I like to do in After Effects or what I like to do is cinema is like rig things or like do some complex code things or do whatever, break it in some fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is Houdini. That's what Houdini is. You know, like you could do whatever you want with it. And so like, had I known that at the outset, I might have just gone straight away into that and been more ahead on different things or whatever. But again, I don't know that you would know that, you know, like, you know, because it's hard to see. Like you're
that's
like, okay,
that's such a better answer than like, here's
you see, like
that's
you see you see like, you know, the like if you watch, you know, like the side effects reel or something, like, oh, that's cool. But then you see like cinema stuff and you're like, you see similar things or more interesting things than one or the other, and you're like, okay, well, what's the difference? But like, you know, there's tons of difference between those two programs. So
yeah, that's quite cool. That's a much better answer than giving me just a quick list.
I mean, there's a list of stuff I would learn. I mean, you know, stuff that I do.
Oh yeah. But like, I think it's interesting that you're almost like, nah, I like the journey I did. I don't regret the software I learned, which is quite.
Yeah, I mean,
that's because definitely.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's hard.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know, you know, like without knowing or whatever. I mean, like even me telling somebody like, hey, you should learn Houdini, like they're okay. What does that mean? You know, like because again, it depends on what you like to do. You might be just perfectly fine with cinema only ever. And you can make all sorts of cool stuff in it. Like it's limitless, you know? So
I hope you enjoyed the chat between myself and Joe Clay. I know I had a blast chatting to him. Hopefully we can get him back on the channel at some stage soon. And this time the last 10 minutes won't be messed up, I promise. Please remember to like, subscribe. Thank you for watching the video, and please go check out the Bold&Break store. If you are keen to become a member, it would really help out the channel. Also, there are working files on there from the tutorials I've done, which you can purchase and download and use to your heart's content for whatever you want. Again, thank you for tuning in. I'm hoping to do more of these chats with motion people in the industry. Thank you and goodbye.